Today's LEGO City update will mark the beginning of the construction of the long-awaited castle. Over a month of landscaping will come to an end as I'm placing down this last layer of 2x4 bricks to complete the hillside. I've spared you all the framework underneath this section because, well, we've done this the past 2 videos already, and therefore I'm quite glad to finally get this part over with. Of course, one last thing I have to do. 2 days I spent on this, getting rid of all the edges, filling up all the gaps with 1x1 plates in order to make it as smooth as possible. And then it was time to start experimenting with different building techniques. Initially, I of course wanted to have round towers for the castle and therefore also try different building techniques with these rounded off 1x2 plates, for example, right there. This smaller platform down there I've prepared will also then be the position for the first tower, but building technique wise I decided against the rounded off 1x2 plates and decided to use once again hinges, but in a different manner this time. As you can see right there, I'm starting off with 2 layers of hinges I've placed perpendicular to each other, and then I've created this sort of octagon as a base frame for the first tower, which now of course created little gaps on the outside, which I've then decided to fill up using brick modifieds to gain a stud, and then a 1x2 slope in this case, because that perfectly fills up the gap of this octagon shape all around the tower. This is what the beginning of the construction looks like, and at this point I knew this is the exact building technique I'm also using for the entire tower. This was the first design, although I wasn't satisfied with how the top looked. There you can, by the way, see what the stabilization looks like from the inside, and then this is what the remodeled and reworked top looks like. So I have a bit of a larger surface area right on top of the tower because that looks more realistic and also I think a bit better. Now it gets super illegal when it comes to finishing off the top of the tower. This platform is placed in between the studs of the hinges, so there's really not too much surface area on which this platform is now being placed, but this building technique I think is absolutely beautiful. I'm now holding everything in place using these battlements on top, finishing off the tower. This of course means that we can place the first 2 towers I've now prepared on top of the hill in order to get an idea of how big the castle is going to be. And the most important part after having finished the first 2 towers is to then furthermore get an idea of how tall the walls of the rest of the castle are going to be. I then took measurements of the angle and of course the height of the wall and then started building. And as you can see right there, of course we once again have angles inside the wall to make the castle look much more interesting. Also once again achieved by the exact same building technique with hinges on the inside and then these 1x2 slopes on the outside. On top of the wall I've placed these 1x3 jumper plates, which allows me to make out of the 3 studs width of the wall 4 on top, and then once again everything is finished off with battlements right on top. Also right there you can see these cut plates I've used to get rid of the small gap right where the angle is. Then I continue taking measurements of the wall, continue building because we obviously don't want any gaps inside the wall, and this is what now the first row of wall looks like in between the 2 towers we've built earlier. This right here is the giant entrance placed at an angle. This took me ages, and then the second part, which was not only built at an angle but also, as you can see right there, on a slope. This part was even more difficult, and then of course the second tower is placed on the left hand side to finish off this section of the wall. Although I absolutely love experimenting with different building techniques, this part of the castle already took me over 2 weeks to build. Therefore, and I don't think I've ever said that, I was quite happy to be able to continue with some landscaping, vegetation and so on in order to further integrate the castle into the rest of the landscape. And then another thing you guys wanted me to add were older parts of the castle that have turned into ruins by now, and I thought this would be a perfect fit right inside this forest, which is at the moment still of course quite boring. I started off by placing 1 arch right there, and the basic idea was that this was basically a sort of watchtower for the castle that was placed further in front on the hill. So back in the days where they had to defend the castle, they could then place scouts outside the castle who could then theoretically alarm the knights in the main castle up on top of the hillside should attackers arrive, and therefore they have this head start or advantage. So I've also, as you can see, thought a bit about storytelling that we could theoretically add. Now, this is my favorite part of today's video. Although this is super easy, I took this owl and placed this angled trans clear stud with a pin attached at the bottom of the owl. Now took the end part of the pin, placed that inside this hole of the stem I've used to create these pine trees, and now this totally looks as if the owl is currently flying through the forest. And this was another idea I had, currently nosediving right towards its prey, which is then hidden at the bottom of the forest. I then also decided to hide more animals throughout the rest of the forest. For example, right there, a spider at the ruins, a little squirrel right there, as well as a deer, simply to bring the entire forest to life, since you guys wanted me to do that. And this is now also the very first time you can see what the first beginning of the castle looks like on top of this hillside. I've of course already placed the next bricklink orders for the next towers because I can't wait to continue building the castle. But another thing that I'm hyped about is we finally started automating not only the tram line but also the entire rest of the railway system. And now this is what the first system looks like. We can now not only digitally control the Lego motors, the 25-year-old 9-volt motors by the way, but we've also prepared the next few buttons that can be pressed in order to then be able to steer the tram if you stand right in front of the Lego city. And for that I'll now first of all show you what exactly we had to do with the 9-volt motors. I don't think you get to see the inside of a Lego motor every day, so this was also for us quite interesting to see and also to work on, because what we now had to do is not only take everything apart and switch out certain parts, but also add this little thing right there. You can see that this is a so-called decoder, and this is used to now get signals from the train tracks, which then allows the control station we'll use in future to not only know how fast the train is going, but also where exactly it currently is within the train tracks. And it also allows us to use a completely different system to then steer the trains. This right there is the first test run we did using one of the model railway control stations that of course normally isn't compatible with Lego, and therefore we had to add this decoder I told you about just a second ago. And this was only the easy part so far, because we then had to take apart the entire train system, because we had to separate the train tracks into different parts. Super complicated stuff. Mainly this part was done by my brother, and I'm super glad he did all that work. It will be worth every second he spent on developing this new system. Then of course all the cables are being hidden underneath the platform, so we don't have any of the chaos on top inside the Lego city, which of course would look quite ugly. And then after having placed everything in, reconnected everything after, by the way, 1 entire month of building, this is where the big control station is now being placed. It's hidden somewhere behind the Lego city, and for example right there, this part is currently marked yellow, and therefore you can see within the station where the tram is currently stationed. And now all this hidden work was done to achieve one single thing, and this is to have the tram not only run automatically but also then stop for a few seconds at each single stop that we of course then can place into the system. Then continue to the next stop, as you can see right there, stop again for at the moment 5 seconds, but I think we'll make everything a bit slower in future, and then once again continue to the next station and so on. And then at least for the tram at the moment you can also steer everything with these 2 buttons we've placed right in front, so you can then decide where the tram should go. And this is also now in preparation for the giant train system we've added inside the rest of the Lego city, but this will take us more than 1 month, I guess, so well, give us time just to keep you up to date when it comes to all these different automating projects we have going on in the Lego city besides all the building. With that being said, that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.